Hello, everybody. Welcome to Brandon's Haunted Library. My name is Brandon, your undead librarian, and I read and talk about fantasy, literary fiction, and of course, horror. Thank you for choosing my video. Today, we're looking ahead to the future of horror with 12 of my most anticipated horror book releases of 2026. These are the stories that I'm looking forward to, with some great names in the genre delivering their next terrifying tales this year. So, whatever kind of horror you're into, there's something here for everyone. So, get ready for some horror gems coming down the pipe in 2026. First up is Grace by A.M. Shine, releasing on February 10th. And this is one I'm especially excited about because I was lucky enough to receive an advanced reader copy through NetGalley, courtesy of Bloomsbury, USA. The only other book I've read from Shine is his hit The Watchers, which I largely enjoyed for its atmosphere and concept. And I actually think the film adaptation is pretty underrated, even if it's not without many flaws. Grace sounds like it's again leaning hard into atmosphere, and again drawing on traditional Irish mythology and modern Gothic horror. The story follows Grace, who was adopted as a child and has no memory of where she came from, until a mysterious phone call leads her back to a lonely, forgotten island off the coast of Ireland. An island plagued by rumors of strange deaths, missing children, and a long buried evil. I'm a sucker for isolated settings and folklore driven horror like this, and if this delivers the same slow burn unease as The Watchers, this could be a strong and haunting start to the year. Releasing on March 24th, Wretch is a book I'm really curious about, even if my excitement is a bit more cautious than with some of the others on this list. Eric LaRocca is known for writing extremely visceral and gruesome horror, having won a couple Splatterpunk awards, and his work frequently centers queer characters and relationships. I've only read his most recent short story collection, where I really loved two of the stories and didn't connect with the other two at all. But the ones that worked for me were strong enough that I want to keep following his career. What makes Wretch especially interesting is that it gives LaRocca space to work in a longer format, which is something I'm curious to see from him. The full length novel follows Simeon Link, a man consumed by grief after his husband's death, who joins a strange support group called the Wretches, offering one last intimate moment with loved lost ones for a price. The premise seems to lean into themes of grief, obsession, and love as something dangerous and transgressive. If LaRocca can sustain the destructive beauty and hallucinatory horror that the publishers promise for the course of a full novel, this could be a big evolution in his work. Publishing April 2nd, Monumental by Adam Neville. I haven't yet read Adam Neville, but I've heard consistently great things about his work, and he's been recommended to me by a couple people who really know my tastes, and his reputation for writing genuinely terrifying horror precedes him. This novel takes a kayaking and camping trip into the wilderness and turns it into a brutal fight for survival after disaster strikes and a group of friends realize they're trapped on a private land with no escape until the tide shifts. As tensions rise and secrets begin to surface, the valley's ancient folklore reveals something far more sinister lurking beneath it all. Wilderness survival horror mixed with supernatural is a combination that should really work for me. Coming out April 14th, The Hive is an epic Lovecraftian horror novel from Ronald Malfi, and it sounds right up my alley. This one centers on a small coastal town in the aftermath of a violent storm, where residents become obsessively attached to random objects the storm left scattered throughout the community. What starts as a mild fixation quickly escalates into secrecy, paranoia, and collective madness, with the town behaving more and more like a single organism, like bees in a hive. In addition, a young boy in the community finds himself in the possession of a strange and inexplicable power. I love horror like this, and this premise feels like classic cosmic horror filtered through a small town community lens. I'm pretty excited to see how this one is. Coming out April 21st, The Caretaker is one of those releases that will feel almost unavoidable in a few months if you follow horror literature online, particularly through Reddit. This is Marcus Kluwer's first novel since his viral debut, We Used to Live Here, which I really enjoyed and definitely found creepy, even if it didn't quite live up to the massive hype surrounding it for me. Still, that book showed me a lot of promise, and it absolutely made me want to watch to see what Kluwer would do next. His new book follows Macy Mullins, who answers a vague and ominous Craigslist ad for a 3-day caretaking job on a remote property along the Oregon coast. What starts as strange but manageable side gig quickly spirals into a waking nightmare as Macy realizes there may be an incomprehensible evil tied to the house, and she may be the only person standing between it and the rest of humanity. I love this setup: isolated setting, strange and ominous vibes, and the kind of something is really wrong here energy that Clearwater did really well in his first novel. If The Caretaker refines and expands on what worked in his debut, this could be a major release for him. Also releasing on April 21st, Japanese Gothic is easily one of my most anticipated books of the year. Harlequin Trade Publishing, if you're watching, I'd love for you to approve my NetGalley request. Kylie Lee Baker had been writing young adult fantasy for several years, but she really broke into adult horror in a major way last year with Bat Eater and Other Names for Cora Zhang, which I thought was pretty incredible. The book knew exactly when to be disturbing, featured a really compelling cast of characters, and had thoughtful commentary on anti Asian and Asian American discrimination and hate during the COVID-19 pandemic, complemented by its angry horror edge. Japanese Gothic sounds wildly ambitious, weaving together Japanese mythology, historical horror, and a dual timeline story set nearly 150 years apart. We follow Lee Turner in 2026, haunted by a violent act he can't fully remember, and Sen, a young samurai in exile in 1877, both tied to the same house hidden among the sword ferns. Between shifting realities, ghosts, unreliable narratives, and something ancient lurking beneath the house, this feels like the kind of high concept horror I can picture Baker excelling at. And if this book also delivers the same emotional depth and creeping unease as Bat Eater, I think this could be something really special, so I'm cautiously optimistic. Releasing on April 28th, Molka by Monica Kim is another one I'm especially excited about, partially because I was able to get an advance reader copy through NetGalley thanks to Kensington Publishing. Monica Kim's debut, The Eyes Are the Best Part, was one of my favorite horror reads of 2024, violent, unsettling, and razor sharp in its portrayal of female rage. That book completely sold me on Kim as an author to watch. Molka dives into voyeurism, power, and obsession centered around a hidden camera culture in Seoul, Korea. We follow Jun Young, an IT technician who has access to every camera in his building and quietly abuses that power, and Dache, a woman desperate to be loved and seemingly only appreciated by her wealthy boyfriend. When a citywide hidden camera scandal erupts, Dache's dreams of a fairy tale romance twists into grotesque nightmare when her boyfriend abandons her and her parents reject her. Kim has a talent for turning real world anxieties into brutal, unflinching horror, and this sounds like it's going to be disturbing and deeply uncomfortable. If it hits anywhere near as hard as her debut, I'm definitely excited. Publishing on May 5th, I Know a Place is a short story collection from Nat Cassidy. It will include Cassidy's novella Rest Stop, which I thought was absolutely incredible, and the work that really made me sit up and pay attention to him as a horror writer. Since then, his novel When the Wolf Comes Home has more than earned the praise it's been getting, and it ended up being one of my favorite books I read last year. This collection expands upon Cassidy's greatest strength in Rest Stop, turning familiar everyday locations into something horrific. From deserted gas stations and doctors' offices to haunted kitchens and isolated desert retreats, Cassidy has a knack for delivering big, terrifying set pieces while still grounding them in character and theme, even within a short story format. And if the rest of this collection hits anywhere near the level of Rest Stop, this is going to be an absolute must read for me. Releasing on May 19th, The Dorians by Nick Cutter is a book I'm approaching with a mix of curiosity and cautious excitement. The only Nick Cutter novel I've read so far is The Troop, which I did enjoy. Its gross out body horror did really get to me, though not necessarily my cup of tea. But I know he has a very dedicated fan base that really connects with his work. This feels like a great opportunity for me to dive back in and see how his style has evolved and how I connect with his newer work. Set on a remote island in the Canadian wilderness, The Dorians follows a group of elderly volunteers offered the chance to halt or even reverse aging through some experimental biological technology. As with a lot of Cutter's work, the premise leans into body horror and isolation, and the idea of immortality filtered through this sounds like fertile ground for something disturbing and compelling. And if Cutter brings the same intensity he did with The Troop, this could definitely be a pretty unsettling read. Publishing on June 9th, Headlights by CJ Lead is one of those books I'm excited about entirely on the strength of the author. I absolutely loved Mayfly. I thought it was an extremely well written debut, completely unhinged and brutal, and made me very curious to see what CJ Lead would deliver in her future books. I haven't yet read her 2025 follow up novel, American Rapture, yet, but she's firmly on my radar. Headlights follows Special Agent Daniel Stansfield on what should be his last day with the FBI, before he's pulled back into a series of disturbing crimes in the city he fled years earlier. People waking up on highways with no memory, wearing the skin of strangers, and those strangers' hair tied around their tongue. It's the kind of grotesque psychological horror that feels very on brand for Lead, mixing an investigative framework with the detective's trauma and memory beneath it all. Headlight sounds like it could be another unforgettable novel if it lives up to the intensity of Mayfly. Publishing on July 7th, Fabulous Bodies is the newest horror novel from Chuck Tingle, and at this point, I'll pretty much check out anything he writes. I've read all three of his previous full length novels and enjoyed them to varying degrees. Lucky Day is probably my favorite so far, though Bury Your Gaze was also very solid and deserved the attention it got. Tingle is such a playful, unpredictable voice in horror, consistently centering queer characters and themes while balancing genuine emotion with absurd, over the top energy. This one sounds like pure chaotic fun, a supernatural mashup of Drive and Beetlejuice set in Palm Springs, following Poppy Stringer, a fashion influencer by day, and grave robber by night. When a flamboyant, recently deceased rock star icon wakes up mid body retrieval, the night spirals into blood soaked mayhem and fabulous spectacle. Between the camp, the carnage, and Tingle's flair for heartfelt weirdness, Fabulous Bodies feels like it could be another perfect example of how horror can be both humorous and unhinged at the same time. And the fact that this is compared to Beetlejuice makes me really excited to see the characterization of this reanimated rock star. Set to publish on September 9th, Kiss Slay Replay is a new release from Rachel Harrison, an author whose lighter, more character driven approach to horror really works for me. Of the four books I've read from her so far, I think I appreciated her 2025 release Play Nice the most, with Such Sharp Teeth coming in a close second. She has a great knack for writing relatable, though not always necessarily likable, characters, and grounding horror tropes in very human anxieties. This one takes every wedding guest's worst nightmare and cranks it up to 11, blending slasher horror with Groundhog's Day premise. After surviving a brutal masked killer attack at a picture perfect wedding, Willa wakes up only to find herself reliving the same day over and over again, forced to navigate masked killers, romantic awkwardness, and escalating carnage. I love the end of the book summary that says Willa must learn how to escape or else suffer a fate worse than death, being an eternal wedding guest. The mix of humor, romance, and escalating violence feels very on brand for Harrison. This sounds like it'd be a really fun movie. If she sticks to landing, letting the premise go wild, this sounds like it could be a really fun late year horror release. And there you have it, 12 horror books to look forward to in 2026. I'd love to hear which of these caught your eye or if there are any others you're anticipating that I missed. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you're looking for even more great horror recommendations, be sure to check out my favorite 25 horror reads of 2025. I'll link it here for you. It's packed with some of the best horror I read last year. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, happy reading.